Hello there. My name's Jack St. Clair, and as the owner of our two Homestead offices for the past 15 years, I find no greater pleasure in the fact that we are providing employment opportunities to those that want to make a difference in the lives of seniors in Northern Virginia. Over the years, I've been so lucky to employ thousands of caregivers. When I started our businesses in 2006, I had no idea that I would form such close relationships with so many of our caregivers. Watching our caregivers work so hard day in and day out is awe inspiring. I'm always floored at how hard they work in the midst of a job that can take both an emotional and sometimes physical toll. On the flip side, working with thousands of people over the years has also made me realize that not everyone has been taught or knows how to end well. What do I mean by end well? When you are trying to get a job, you do everything in your power to make a positive first impression on your new employer. After all, a positive impression goes a long way in whether or not a company is going to want to consider you in the hiring process. Similar to how making a positive first impression is so vitally important to starting a job, it's equally as important to end well when you decide it's time for you to leave the company. Let's face it, unlike our grandparents who worked at the same place for 30, 40, and sometimes even 50 years, most employees this day and age don't usually stick around a company for decades on end. Regardless of whether you're with Home Instead for 1 month or 17 years, like one of our caregivers, it's critically important that you end well when you decide it's time to part ways. After being in this business for 15 years, I've learned a lot and I've compiled a very important list of things that you should and should not do when you decide to leave employment at any job, whether it's Home Instead or somewhere else. First, always give at least a 2 weeks notice. This is important for most jobs, but it's vitally important when you have a job working with senior citizens. If someone leaves our company and doesn't give a 2 weeks notice, it causes unnecessary stress and sadness on their client. For a minute, think about your favorite grandmother or grandfather. Picture them in your mind. Again, your favorite grandmother or grandfather. Now, picture them having formed a really sweet and deep bond with a caregiver. Can you imagine if that caregiver quit with no notice and your grandparent never saw that caregiver again? I have personally seen many clients go through heartache when finding out that their caregiver left with little or no notice, as it didn't get the client and caregiver time to say goodbye to each other. It really is a heartbreaking and unnecessary situation that can easily be fixed with giving 2 weeks notice at a minimum. Secondly, never ever ghost your employer. And when I say the term ghost, I mean you basically fall off of the face of the earth and never contact them again. You don't return phone calls or messages. There's nothing more unsettling than when someone we have spent time to form a relationship with, meaning you, our caregiver, suddenly stops returning phone calls and messages. And here's the thing, when this happens, we don't think that you've ghosted us. We actually start to think that something bad has happened to you. We think of the worst case scenario. And the reason our minds start to go to this is because we've had situations in the past that are worst case scenarios when a caregiver either hasn't shown up to a shift or they stopped returning phone calls, and we found out that sometimes the caregiver passed away. This is why when you stop returning phone calls or you don't show up to a shift, we call your emergency contacts, and we also call the local law enforcement for them to do a wellness check at your home. It would be extremely embarrassing for law enforcement to show up to your house or for your emergency contacts to call you, for you to tell them that you're okay, but you decided to stop responding to your employer. Please keep open communication with our office. Which leads me to my final point. Communication is critical. Don't believe the falsehoods that your employer doesn't care about you or a situation that you're currently dealing with in life, because we do. Here's a great example. We had a wonderful caregiver who worked with us Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, with a client that she had formed a deep and meaningful caregiving relationship with. Late one Sunday night, this caregiver received word that her father had been diagnosed with stage 3 or 4 liver cancer. Obviously, this caregiver was extremely distraught and beside herself that her father had this diagnosis, just like any of us would be. She called the office the next morning at 7 a.m., and instead of telling us what was going on, she said, "I'm quitting on the spot. I can't handle life anymore." And she hung up the phone. We were flabbergasted and so very worried about her. We attempted to reach her several times, and it took us about a week to finally get through. When she told us the story about her father, we mourned with her. We were sad with and for her. But I wish that she had told us the story when she had called us before. Bottom line, I would have much rather this particular caregiver call out of her shift at the last minute and tell us that she had a family emergency that she needed to tend to and that she would need the next 1 to 2 weeks off for her to just quit altogether. This story does have a happy ending. She came back to work for the company. We were able to put her back with her same client, and she was even able to serve the client until he passed away. Bottom line, it's critically important that you end well, especially when working with a company that serves a vulnerable population such as our aging seniors. Thanks so much, and we're looking forward to having a mutually beneficial working relationship with you.